For years, the brutal story of Jose Guerrero unfolded slowly in Madera County, California. It began in the spring of 1995 when a lone farm worker made a horrifying discovery in an orchard just outside town. A woman's body was found lying among the peach trees. That woman was 42-year-old Julie Ann Woodley, a local mother of two. Authorities later determined Woodley had been shot and sexually assaulted, a crime of violence so savage it stunned the community. In the coming months and years, more women would be found murdered in similar ways. Each killing deepened the mystery, and for nearly a decade, the identity of the killer would remain unknown. Welcome back to The Sky Opened, a true crime YouTube channel where we dive deep in lesser-known cases. If you like what you see here, please subscribe, leave a like, and comment below what you thought about the case. Woodley had not returned home the previous night. She was last seen alive about 8 hours before her body was found. Investigators arrived at the scene and quickly realized this was no accident. Woodley had been shot multiple times, and forensic examination later confirmed she had also been sexually assaulted. Woodley was described as a quiet woman who kept to herself, a mother of two whose children did not live with her. She had spent time living near C Street in Madera, a rundown block of motels and bars known to locals for prostitution and drugs. The orchard where she was found was several miles away in the sparsely populated outskirts of town. Police theorized Woodley might have been lured to the orchard after leaving C Street. Despite this theory, officers had no suspect. The investigation initially yielded no clear leads, and the case went cold, ominous, and unsolved. Months later, on November 28, 1995, the killer struck again. This time, however, there was a survivor. Evelyn Estrada was a 42-year-old homeless woman living on the streets of Madera. On the night of her attack, Estrada said she met a man who offered her a ride in a pickup truck. The man introduced himself as Jose, got into his green pickup with Estrada, and drove out of town. After some distance, he stopped on a remote dirt road. Estrada later recounted what happened next. The man suddenly grabbed her and threw his arm around her neck, brandishing a large knife. He forced her out of the truck and onto the ground. The attacker slashed at her with a knife, carving deep wounds across her throat and face. In terror and pain, Estrada fought desperately for her life. She managed to break free and ran from the scene through the darkness toward town. She hid in brush along the roadside until help arrived. When deputies found her, Estrada was in shock. Her neck and face bore the knife scars, but miraculously, she was alive. Doctors at the hospital later stitched her wounds. The scars on her throat would be permanent reminders of that night. Estrada provided the police with a description of her attacker, a Hispanic male, likely in his mid-20s, driving a green pickup truck, who had introduced himself as Jose. The description was the first concrete lead that law enforcement had ever received. In her frantic escape, the killer had left behind the first real clue. Investigators immediately saw the connection between Estrada's attack and Julie Woodley's murder. Both incidents had occurred in the same part of town, and both victims had ties to C Street. For the first time, authorities realized they were likely hunting a serial killer. They sketched a profile of the man, someone who picked up vulnerable women from C Street and drove them to isolated locations. The community was rocked by the implication that a predator was loose in Madera, but with no suspects, the case remained open. After the attack on Evelyn Estrada, the murders stopped for a time. Nearly 3 years passed with no new killings. Madera residents dared to hope that the nightmare might be over, but detectives remained vigilant. They kept Woodley's and Estrada's cases active, reviewing evidence and interviewing any potential witnesses. Law enforcement made public appeals, distributing flyers with the suspect's description and urging anyone with information to come forward. Local media reminded residents that a dangerous criminal could still be at large. Despite the renewed scrutiny and fear, no new leads emerged, and the trail went cold once again. Still, investigators quietly noted a clear pattern. All known victims were women connected to C Street who had disappeared or been found dead in remote areas. The killer would not stay silent forever. On the morning of July 15, 1998, ranch workers found another body in a Madera orchard. The victim was 30-year-old Charlene Fowler. Fowler, like Woodley, had been living near C Street. She had a history of homelessness and addiction, and she was last seen alive in town a short time before her death. Investigators who examined Fowler's body determined that she had been strangled to death. There were no gunshot wounds this time, but the brutality was unmistakable. Witnesses reported seeing a light-colored pickup truck in the area around the time Fowler was killed. The similarities were undeniable. A lone woman from C Street found dead in an orchard. The sheriff's office now had its proof. A serial killer was at work. The announcement set off alarms throughout the county. Local news reported that another victim had been killed, and police warned residents to be cautious. Deputies increased patrols and promised that every resource would be used to find the murderer. But even as patrols intensified, the evidence remained sparse. The killer had left no eyewitnesses and no obvious forensic trail. The last known victim emerged later that year. On November 22, 1998, 22-year-old Tamara Jones Hernandez was reported missing. Tamara had been visiting relatives in Madera from out of town. She left her family's home that night to buy milk for her young children and vanished. The following morning, her body was discovered beside a rural road near Madera. Tamara's death was the third confirmed murder in the string. Investigators noted signs that she had been sexually assaulted and killed. The location and circumstances fit the chilling pattern. A vulnerable woman from the C Street area, abducted and murdered in a lonely place. By late 1998, it was clear to everyone. A serial killer had preyed on the women of Madera for years. Police redoubled their efforts. They searched orchards and rural roads, canvassed neighborhoods, and worked with nearby counties to share information. But despite all efforts, the killer remained at large. The case files for these murders sat on detectives' desks, growing cold with time. It would take fate and new technology to break the case. The breakthrough came by chance. In 1999, a year after Tamara Hernandez's murder, officers in Madera County pulled over a man named Jose Guerrero on suspicion of driving under the influence. Guerrero was 26 years old at the time. He was convicted of DUI and sent to Wasco State Prison to serve his sentence. It was there, serving time for an unrelated offense, that Guerrero made a crucial mistake. He began bragging about crimes he had committed. Fellow inmates reported hearing him boast that he had done terrible things, hinting at multiple violent acts. Meanwhile, the Madera Sheriff's Office had preserved biological evidence from the crime scenes. Knowing that forensic science might one day provide answers, that day came when California required prisoners to submit DNA samples upon release. In 2004, as Guerrero's release approached, he was obliged to give a blood sample for the state DNA database. Scientists ran the sample through their system, and within hours a match appeared. Guerrero's DNA was identical to the genetic material collected at Tamara Hernandez's murder scene. Detectives rushed to Wasco prison and arrested Guerrero in his cell. The department was electrified. They finally had a suspect. With Guerrero in custody, investigators immediately obtained warrants to collect additional DNA. They compared it to evidence from the other cases. It did not take long for confirmation. DNA from both Julie Woodley's and Charlene Fowler's cases matched Jose Guerrero as well. Now authorities had the smoking gun they needed. Jose Guerrero, a local man who had lived quietly in Madera, was linked to 3 murders and the attempted murder of Evelyn Estrada. His truck matched the descriptions, and Estrada's witness account aligned with his identity. Prosecutors charged Guerrero with first-degree murder in each case and with attempted murder. Within days, word spread through Madera. The man who had terrorized their community was finally behind bars. In the months before the trial, investigators and reporters tried to understand the killer's background. Jose Guerrero was identified as a Hispanic man, born in 1973, who had lived in and around Madera for most of his life. By the mid-1990s, he was doing odd construction jobs and had purchased a green pickup truck, the exact color and type Estrada had described. He had never been in trouble for violence before the 1999 DUI, making his sudden link to these crimes all the more shocking. Psychologists and detectives noted disturbing traits in Guerrero. He was unnaturally calm and even bragged about his crimes in jail. This behavior suggested psychopathic tendencies, a capacity for violence without empathy. When Guerrero's attorneys took the case, they tried to cast doubt on his guilt. They hinted that perhaps the sex with 2 of the victims had been consensual, and they even argued Guerrero might be mentally ill and not fully responsible. However, prosecutors painted a different picture: a cold, calculating predator. The evidence indicated that Guerrero had carefully chosen vulnerable victims and carried out his attacks with ruthless efficiency. In court, Guerrero often appeared emotionless as graphic details of the crimes were presented, further unsettling those who watched him. By the time jury selection began, the profile was clear. Jose Guerrero was a serial killer who had preyed on the women of Madera. The community, once stunned by the initial headlines, braced as the trial approached, eager for the truth and justice for the victims. In the spring of 2009, Madera County held a high-profile murder trial. Prosecutors presented the evidence methodically: crime scene photos, forensic details, and DNA matches linking Guerrero to the attacks. The surviving victim, Evelyn Estrada, took the stand and calmly recounted her encounter with the killer in 1995. The jury was ultimately convinced by the weight of the evidence. Today, Jose Guerrero may not be a name known nationwide, but the story of the Madera killer remains a potent chapter in California crime history. It is a tale of fear, investigation, and ultimately justice. Thanks for watching. Please make sure to subscribe so you're always dialed into true crime cases. Also, leave a comment down below what you thought about the case.